it back and I'm happy to take that.
Does it looks like it's recording on my end. It looks good on yours?
It is now, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
But I think we want to pause it just because then we'll have to trim.
Hi, everybody. As you're coming in, we're just waiting for people to get admitted in. So we'll get started in a couple of minutes here. Thanks for waiting. I am loving the picture of the person who has a possum on their screen. Hawthorne. Amazing. Alrighty, well, let's get started, and folks can jump in when wherever they end up jumping in. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to be part of this conference and part of the Regenerate conference, and to present this workshop on navigating farm transition. And what we'd like to do is invite you guys to a farm transition cafe. So I hope you all have a coffee or a tea in hand and kind of are feeling that coffee shop vibe as we do this workshop. So my name is Dana Penrice. I'm the Prairies Program Manager for Young Agrarians. And I also want to introduce Alex, if you want to give a wave, Alex. She's
Hello.
Alex Polwicki is our e-learning coordinator at Young Agrarians, and she's helped me to put this presentation together. And then we have this whole crew of facilitators from Young Agrarians who are helping us out. So if you guys all want to give a wave, we've got Darcy, Haley, Jolene, Colby, Iris, Sarah, Nikki, and Tiara. And you're going to get to meet all of those people in the breakout rooms when we get into those. So I just want to start with some gratitude and thankfulness for a couple people or a couple groups. First is the Alberta Real Estate Foundation. They helped us to develop this work and this workshop today. And then I also want to give a huge gratitude to the Regenerate organizers, the American Grass-Fed Association, Quivira Coalition, and Holistic Management International. You guys have been, I've been down to the conference a couple times, and really it's just this like wellspring of ideas and great thinking and challenging, and I've really just taken so much inspiration from it over the years, and yeah, this year is exactly the same. So you guys have done such a great job putting this together. Really big congratulations to you. Keeping in the theme of our thankfulness, I'd like to begin by placing land at the center of this conversation. So we're all logging in from all over the place today, and what I'd like to invite you to do is just to close your eyes and think about a special place where you feel most connected to the land, where you feel really deeply rooted. You got that place in mind? Great. Now just take a moment to kind of feel the air, smell the smells, hear the sounds, and be in that place. Now I invite you to think about the people on that land and all of the living beings. Now think back to all of the relationships that that land has had with human beings over time. All of the human beings and non-human beings too. Think back to the land stewards that have been there before us and who have maintained that relationship with the land, and all of the lives that have been provided for because of it. All right, now take a big breath in, smell that last smell, and open your eyes. So Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to kind of ground us in what we're really talking about today. So I'm calling in from Treaty 2 territory, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Sioux, Assiniboine, Dakota, and Dene First Nation peoples, and homeland of the Métis First Nation, or the Métis Nations as well. And this place is also recognized today as Manitoba, Canada. I farm south of a reserve called Wew'suwet'en, and we're just north of another reserve called the Birdtail Sioux First Nations. And we live along a river valley that has been a source of abundance and travel and trade and, spiritual meaning as well. That is an important part of the landscape that I'm in. So I invite you to share where you're calling in from in the chat. And if you would like to do a territory land acknowledgement, that would be great too. And while, our story in Canada is different than the US, our founding story, we too have a lot of work to do because of the imperialism and colonization that has happened here. We need to recognize that
Nina has more books than I do.
We have a history of policies and systemic racism that has led to the breakdown of the relationship and the removal of First Nations from and Métis people from their land. So part of that we need to recognize is that we are working within a colonial land title system that really treats land much more as a commodity than as a relationship, which is why I wanted to start thinking about this as relationship to land. And this has had enormous implications on our society. There's no real simple solutions, but really at Young Agrarians, we believe that we can't thoughtfully begin to explore those solutions without a deep commitment to relationship and to building our understanding. So yesterday, or the day before, I really appreciated the conversation that the conference hosted between Mary Berry and Matthew Rayford on how they really emphasize keeping history as at the forefront, and that we need to really use that to understand where we have come from, where we are now, and where we're going. So with this in our minds and our hearts, we want to offer you this workshop. This is my happy place. So our purpose for today is that we want to create a learning space around farm and ranch transition. So really give you the chance to explore what you've been thinking about this and where you're at. We want to create this space for emergent thoughts and ideas and emotions, and let those things come up kind of when they need to and how they need to. So feel free to do lots of chatter in the chat box, and we'll have some space too in some breakout rooms for you to connect with each other and share what you're actually thinking. We want to really help start the conversation. So I'm going to share some of my transition story. And for me, this was the hardest part, was just getting the conversation going. And we all kind of had these thoughts and our ideas in our heads, but it really needs to get out there for something to actually happen. And so hopefully this will help you to do that. Not only join in the conversation here today, but also bring this back to your situation and start conversations there. And then we also just want to share some resources and support as well. So all of this is wrapped around bringing people back to the land and renewing our rural communities, or urban communities if we're farming there too. Another way to state our purpose is captured in this really great concept. It's a Japanese concept called nemawashi, and it literally means preparing the ground for transplants, for planting transplants. But they use it in their culture as a way of, on Wikipedia it says it's a formal process of quietly laying the foundation for some proposed change or project, by talking to people concerned, gathering support and feedback, and so forth. So we really see transition as this process of change. And so what this workshop is about is how do we set ourselves up so that we can have get into the transition conversation and move our transition planning forward. So like, I'm sure that the States is like Canada, where in Canada, 92% of farmers don't have a transition or succession plan. And at the same time, as we're seeing with young agrarians, we have this like growing movement of people who want to get back on the land and want to farm and want to grow food. And you know, this is the challenge that we're trying to figure out. And for me, my big thing around this is how we steward this transition of farmland and farm businesses from one generation to the next is going to have such a huge impact on the future of agriculture and the food system, and such a huge impact on growing the regenerative farming movement as well. So this is, you know, we need to just get this conversation started and really help each other to do that. So I'd like to offer just a collective agreement or some conversation guidelines around our talk today. So a bit of housekeeping. We're using Zoom. I'm sure you guys have gotten a lot of Zoom instructions before, but just to say that if you're having any problems, please chat in the Zoom. Alex or one of the gals from Quivira will help to fix those problems. We're here to help. Don't let Zoom hold you back. And there's also a call-in number that will be posted too, that if you really can't connect, just call that number. Also, if you want to rename yourself, please go ahead. If you want to put in your preferred pronouns as well, that can help with the conversation. Mute when you're not speaking, or we'll mute you if you're if you can't figure that out. And feel free to have your camera on. It'll help with the conversation, especially when we're in the smaller groups in a bit. But feel free, use the chat, go crazy in there, and yeah, really use this space. This is for you. The other guideline we have for this is that we really believe that the expertise is in the communities. So we're just really here to host the conversation, share some of the things that we've learned. But you guys are really the experts, and there's a ton of wisdom out there. So if you feel like you have something to say, please share it. Please be intentional when you speak. So make sure you have something to say. Don't just start talking for the sake of talking, as sometimes we do. And that'll create space for other people to talk as well. We have a short amount of time, so let's try and make it pretty meaningful. Be attentive. This is tied up in just, you know, practicing your listening skills. I know on Zoom it can be kind of hard, we get distracted, but be present as much as you can be, and be inquiring, ask questions, be curious. And the other thing is that people might share some examples from their own farm, their own situation, and it's so hard to capture what's really going on there. So just suspend any assumptions or judgments about what's going on, because it's so hard to really know what's going on. And please make sure to welcome all voices and make sure everybody gets a chance to speak and share. Is there anything else that anybody would like to offer about the guidelines for the conversation today? Feel free to just throw it in the chat. And just as you're doing that, we wanted to go through this exercise both to set some ground rules for our conversation today, but also to show you a tool that you can use when you're having your conversations in farm transition. Sometimes it's nice to just put it out there. Feel free to steal this list and you know, use it as something to go back to when things are getting heated, or when we can tell somebody's kind of holding back in the conversation. Yeah, and Regenerate has similar guidelines too. They have a little video you can go check out. Awesome. Okay, we're going to jump into an exercise now. So we're going to jump into groups. We are going to do an introduction circle in smaller groups, and we host these learning circles. We've done had thousands of people participate in these introduction circles in our work. What I'd like to invite you all to do is to, once you're in your group, share your name, where you farm, or if you're not a farmer, where you eat food or garden, or where you're at, and then share if you could have one farming superpower from either the generation, the previous generation to you, or the next generation coming up. What would it be? And so Alex is going to put us into breakout groups now. So you're going to get a little pop-up on your screen that'll say something about entering a breakout room. Just click on that. It'll feel like Zoom is shutting down, but it's not. And it'll just wait a little bit and it'll put you into your breakout room. Sound good? Okay, you ready, Alex? We'll be in there for about 15 minutes. So we'll send you guys on your way.
And just a heads up, you'll have 2 people from Young Agrarians or our friends of Young Agrarians that'll be helping to facilitate the conversation. So yeah, sit back and make yourself at home. If anyone can still hear me, it means you haven't moved into your breakout room. You should be able to, okay, I might just move you in there in case you're not able to see the pop-up. Oh, perfect. No, I can. Mhm. Name, I'm not entirely sure how to kind of put people into a room.
Yeah, I just direct messages put in waiting room. I don't know that we can actually put people in. I think they have to accept it.
Okay,
So it might be that they needed to step away from the machine.
yeah, okay.
Leah, is
That
that your
is fine.
understanding when it comes to?
Yeah, there is a setting that that forces people in, which I wish retrospectively I had used in a number of different scenarios. But if you don't check that setting, then yeah, they have to kind of be there and they have to get. And sometimes people they walk away, they get a drink of water, or they're like struggling to find it on their screen.
Yes.
So
Okay, that sounds good. Well, if anybody is still here and wants to go into a breakout room but is not able to, just either unmute yourself, which is in the bottom left-hand corner, and speak up, or feel free to post it in the chat. We'll figure something out.
And I've direct messaged all of the people,
Great,
the 3
thank
people
you.
here. So yeah. Do you want to tell me a story, Alex?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Story. Yeah, what's a good story? Well, I mean, it's been just like a Zoom week for us as well. We've been doing a land forum. Oh, somebody's coming. Fun.
Do you want to explain to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. That'll be the story. Hi, Cody. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry I'm late.
Oh, that's all right. We're actually just in breakout rooms right now where people are part of an introduction circle. Are you okay if I pop you into one?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Glad you could make it. Let's see here. Okay.
And we've got Trudy coming in.
Oh, here we go. Hi, Trudy. Welcome. We're
There we go.
hi
Hi.
there. Glad you could join us.
I'm
We're
trying to get shifted from my phone to my computer here. So
oh, nice. Okay. So
Yeah.
you know what's happening here.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, I'll pop you into a breakout room then.
I was in 3.
Oh, perfect. Good. I'll do that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
You should see the pop-up box now. Nice. Very good.
So you were saying, if you care to go back to that.
Yeah, sure. We're doing a land forum as part of it's like a 2-week kind of session on non-family transition, of which we've kind of like put this into the package of different events that we're hosting, and then next
Yep.
week is all about land leasing.
Mhm.
So that's pretty fun. So we're in the Zoom, our Zoom muscle is very well activated, we'll put it that way.
Yeah,
But it's
watching you guys move through, I was like, "Ooh, maybe they're teaching Zoom." Not sure if that's exciting to want to teach, but I notice a sense of comfortability and ease with the team. So just to honor and acknowledge that.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. How is the conference going for you guys?
I'm like, my spirit is so nurtured
Oh,
through what I'm hearing, and the behind the scenes work is intense. So it's
yeah.
the both, the yes and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Sorry, I'm just gonna text Dana to make sure that she's doing okay in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe I'll just send her a message. Because I, in my haste, forgot to check what time I started the room. I cannot do that.
And we're also recording now, so I don't know if you want to put pause on that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've created a few funny videos now.
Awesome. I hope you guys met somebody new, found somebody across the country. We had some great superpowers in our circle, including patience, being able to read the landscape. We also, Chris Ruby from Mexico had a great one about being able to shoot compost tea from his hands like Superman. So awesome. Thank you guys. So let's start and talk about just, what are we talking about when we're talking about farm transition? So farm transition is a process of planning to transfer the ownership, management, and operations from of the farm business and or farmland from one generation to another. So just a note about language, there's a lot of language used interchangeably. I'm not sure what you guys use down in the States, but farm transition, farm succession, farm transfer, all of those kinds of things is what we're talking about. And really that can look like a bunch of different things where the, we could be transferring the farm business and the assets, or we can be transferring farmland or maybe one or the other or both or all of those kinds of things. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about farm transition. And this is a diagram that we have been working on just kind of as a model for thinking about transition. So this is called the 2-loop model, and it's used in a bunch of different places for sharing a transition of one kind of system to a new system. And when I saw this, it really reminded me of farm transition. So, just like the ecosystems that we work in, farms and businesses have life cycles, and there's different phases where there's new beginnings, growth, abundance, disturbance, and yes, even death, just like ecosystems. And we have this, sometimes we have this view that farms should be like totally, that they're static, that they are never changing, but really they're, a healthy farm, it has these ebbs and flows that go through this kind of cycle. And so on the left-hand side, we have this establishing phase where this is the farm business startup, and you're creating structures, both the physical structures, the business structures, and you're setting kind of the patterns and the routines of how this farm or entity will operate. And then we have this like growing phase where you've kind of got the structure built, and now we're getting the business or the farm kind of set up. It's getting to the scale that works for it. and you're seeing growth in the business. And then we have the stewarding phase, which is like kind of that, you hear farmers say sometimes it's like, this is the way we do things, which is neither a good nor bad statement, but it's like, we've got this kind of thing going on. It's working for us. Not a lot of change maybe is happening, and just kind of working on the business, keeping it going, but stewarding what you've created. And then I'm just going to jump down to the bottom part. So this is kind of, to me, when a new farmer comes along and there's this opportunity for transition, they really come along and they're in this like innovative space. They're thinking creatively. They've got new ideas. And sometimes that can cause a lot of tension within the farm. So especially because the previous generation is probably in a stewarding phase, then the new generation is in this innovation stage. And sometimes those things butt heads, but that's part of the transition. The new farmer usually is, especially now, there's a lot of connecting happening. There's so many ways for new farmers to meet other new farmers and for them to find mentors and get connected into the community. And, that phase is really about trying to develop a support structure for that person or whatever's going on. I'm going to skip over composting and talk about nourishing. So once that new farmer has their ideas, they're learning, maybe they go do an apprenticeship, they're really just kind of cultivating that idea and really figuring out, maybe this is not what I'd want to do, but this is what I want to do, and I want to keep building on that. And then there's this illuminating phase where it's like, this is what's really, we're making it happen kind of thing. And really what the farm transition is moving from that first cycle into the next cycle. And so a lot of this can all be kind of happening at the same time. And part of that transition is recognizing like what's happening within these two things. Where are people at? What needs support? And that kind of thing. A couple other important stages in this, or piece dynamics in this, is the composting. So I love thinking about this of like, how can we take the assets and resources of that previous generation, what they've done, and compost it into something totally new, give that next idea fertility and build on it. And then we also have harvesting. So that's a lot around like taking the ideas from that previous generation, learning why they did things the way that they did. Why did grandma always have her garden in this place? Or, those kinds of storytelling and sharing that's really important. And that's also part of that honoring piece of making sure that we're paying tribute to that generation that came before and all of the hard work that they have gone through. So what I'd invite you to do is, that was a very quick overview of this, and it's in the documents that we've sent to you, but just take a moment to kind of think about where do you see yourself in this, and what are some of the dynamics that you see happening in your situation. Maybe you're in the bottom and you aren't even working with another older farmer yet, but you're kind of working on that connecting phase of meeting people and running through ideas. Or maybe you're in the previous generation and you're kind of thinking about, how do we keep going with what we're doing, or that kind of thing. So just jot down, if you've got your pen and paper, jot down what you're thinking, or if you want to as well, feel free to kind of share in the chat. Where you think you're at. Jolene says stewarding. Some connecting in there, meeting other people. Great. And think through a little bit too, like what's been your experience there? Is it comfortable? Is it challenging? Is it are you impatient and want to get on to something else? Awesome. Yeah, so think this is a big diagram that we gave you. So feel free to just, look at it one day and ponder it. I think it's something that takes a little bit to wrap your head around, but kind of helps to just structure your thinking around the situation a little bit. So we'll move along here. So what's being passed on? So I think this is really important to think about because one of the most important, we often focus on the business or the land or the customers, but one of the really important things that the previous generation passes on is their wisdom and their ideals and their way of being in the world. And for me, one of the best definitions of culture that I've ever heard is that culture is the ground out of which human beings grow. And if we think of the ground and the soil, we know that soil has these really healthy elements to it, and then it also can have some unhealthy elements to it. And so, I really think it's important for us to slow down and think through, how do we pass on the best of our culture to the next generation? And how do we try and minimize those unhelpful elements? Transition is this time of change. It's a time where we can ask questions. We can question the way things are happening. We can really just explore what's possible. And I think it's a time to really think through, like, we have this culture on this farm. What is it, and how do we pass it on? So just another reflection, and please share in the chat, is what besides if you're the previous generation, what besides the assets and the land do you want to pass on to the next generation? And just as importantly, what don't you want to pass on? And if you're from like a new generation, just feel free to flip this as what would you want to be passed on to you, or what wouldn't you want to be passed on to you as well? And feel free to share in the chat. I know some of these are a little bit personal questions, so if you want to jot them down, that's fine too. Yeah, like lack of self-care, that's a really great one. We'll talk a little bit about trying to articulate our needs later on. Deep knowledge of the land and the ecology, yeah. Don't want to pass on stress, or thinking that stress is productivity. That's great. Yeah, trying to work on some of the bigotry and hierarchy and dominance that thinking of our broader culture too. That's a great one. Is what are the things that we don't want to include from our broader culture in this? Yeah, belief in gender roles. The values of regenerative ranching, we want to pass those on. That's so great, you guys. The dedication, that hard work ethic, maybe not too hard work if we're thinking about that other piece around self-care, making sure there's space for that. Healthy land, healthy people, profitable business. Awesome. Great job, you guys. So it's important to think, no matter who's involved in this, whether it's, I think these what we're introducing is something for the previous generation, the next generation. It's for siblings who aren't farming. It's for, other people that are around with the family farm. We all bring something to the table, and I think that's really important to recognize. So in the traditional succession planning stuff, I think sometimes we get caught up in the financial and in the assets, and it feels like it's this one-way exchange of the previous generation just giving everything to the next generation. But it's important to recognize that everybody has something to give. And I think of the new generation that I work a lot with through Young Agrarians, and they often have a lot of social capital of, we can build businesses off of that social capital, and we can change what the farm does with that. Or, they have experiential capital. I notice that many of them have experience in management of some kind, of permaculture systems, other things. So I think, just really reminding ourselves that this isn't a one-way transaction. There's all kinds of dynamics going on and in what people bring to this as well. So another reflection exercise for you guys is, what skills do you think are needed for a successful transition? What are we have some skills from farming, but are there skills that you can think of that you either have or maybe you want to work on that would help the transition process, like we talked about, to help to support people to come to the table and start talking about these things? And then that last question there was, what areas do you want help with? So possibly, bringing in advisors. Maybe there's something, I think it's really important to say, I don't want to do this, especially when we're trying to farm at the same time. Any thoughts on that? Skill, patience, open heart, active listening. Being organized, that's a really great one. I think I'm going to share a little bit more about our farm transition story, but I think being organized is what we really struggle with. Resilience. Resilience is a really great one. Like knowing that the farm transition process itself is not just rainbows and butterflies. It can be a slog, but it's important work that we all need to do to keep our land, keep people on the land. Darcy's thrown out business management skills. We definitely need those. Working collaboratively, yeah. Sometimes, we were out on our farms working by ourselves lots, and we're pretty independent, but we need to learn how to work with each other. Cash management, yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I hope this exercise kind of gets you thinking about like what should I be learning? What am I not good at that I want to improve on to make this more successful? Or what again, thinking about advisors, it's not just financial and accounting advisors that you can bring in. You can bring in people who are good at community building and communications and facilitation, who can support that process on your farm too. And from many of the stories I've heard, that's where smoother transitions can happen, is when you have a great facilitator to come in and help. So thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. I want to jump into next into just some different types of conversations to have. So I've got here 7 different kinds of conversations to have, and I'll just work through each one of them. And I think what you'll see is there are different types of conversations, and each of them has a little bit of a different spin on what's going on. And I think as we're going through these, sometimes these are conversations that we have to have with ourselves. Often, as we're preparing for a conversation, it's important for us to think about, well, what do I think of this, and discuss that with yourself in your own mind. But, or it's conversations to have with the people around you. The other thing in this strategy, like I said before, For me, when we started our farm transition, we've been on the farm for 2 years now. We're on my in-laws' farm. And it just was so hard for us to just like have that initial person articulate, I want to go back to the farm, or we want to come back. And once we got it on the table, you know, we kind of could move things along better. And I hope these different kinds of conversations can help you to do that. And then once you articulate that, there's all these other conversations to have after it. So hopefully this will help guide you through those. And these are conversations to have also with different people, but also have them, you know, at different times and different places. I really don't, one of the things I learned from our transition is that I'm really comfortable with like formal meeting structures at the kitchen table with notes and everything, but my in-laws aren't. And so we don't have very many of our transition conversations at the dinner table anymore. Sometimes we'll come together for more like a farm business meeting, but lots of the other conversations happening out in the field, you know, while we're fixing machinery, while we're driving through pastures, or, you know, while you're weeding a row of carrots, that's where some deep conversations can happen that are really important, that can support the rest of the transition conversations. And I think the other piece about this to remember with conversations is that, like a lot of, like even us coming and saying we want to farm, like it's the first time you're articulating something out loud. And so you can kind of fumble with it. And, you know, it takes practice, and that these conversations are meant to happen over a long period of time. And just because one doesn't go so well, or you didn't kind of say what you really wanted to say, or, you know, doesn't mean you can't come back to that same conversation. It's a process that happens over time, and it's the accumulation of those processes, of those conversations, that is what's really important. The other piece around this is that it's a lot around relationship building, and I felt like us coming back to the farm and starting this process was really this opportunity to get to know my in-laws and for them to get to know me. And so we really set out like 2 years for us to just honestly get to know each other, get to know the situation. Even though I've known my in-laws for 15 years, they really don't know a lot about how I operate, what my visions are, all of those kinds of things. And yeah, it can take a long time. And I also think that's important for in-family transitions as well. My partner was away from the farm for 10 years. So it was like his parents had to get to know him again when he came back, because he'd changed so much. But so let's dive in. So the first kind of conversation you can have is a big picture conversation. And I find that the new generation really loves these conversations usually. It's those big picture things of like what gets you out of bed in the morning and what drives your life. Like, what is your reason for being in the world? What feeds your soul? These are great conversations to have around the campfire, or, you know, this is a perfect example of thinking about when you should have these conversations. When the machinery's broke and everybody's stressed, don't try and have a big picture conversation, because people will get frustrated with you. You might get a wrench thrown at you. But, you know, I noticed that in my situation, my in-laws love having these big philosophical conversations at Christmas. And so we kind of save them for then. Sometimes they get loud and boisterous and argumentative, but it's been a place where I've really learned a lot about who they are. And then there's a question of intention. So the intention kind of brings that big picture down a little bit. So why are you actually taking this course of action? Why farming? What else could you be doing? And why aren't you doing something else? And I think this is a great conversation to have with yourself to begin with, to really figure out, like, you know, farming's hard, and why do you choose to do it? And these two questions are really, if you can understand these with you and with the people around you, you really understand a lot about what motivates people. And when things are tough, you can come back to these conversations, that motivation, and get yourself out of bed when you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. So they're really important to have. And again, you're not going to understand this in one conversation. It takes many conversations to get to know someone. The next one is the situation and context. So this is like what's actually going on. So what's the situation we're in, what's currently working and not working, and what those questions around thinking through what you would need to know in order to be helpful. So for me in coming back, before we came back, one of the really important pieces for me to know is the financial situation of the farm. And my in-laws were gracious enough to just give us their financial statements from the previous year. And that gave me a ton of confidence for them to first give it to us and then to go through the numbers and say, okay, they're in debt, but not like insurmountable, or, this is what I'm getting myself into. This is the level of risk I'm comfortable with, and I can do that. So that was great. But maybe you need to know more about like the grazing plan or the types of production happening. There's a bunch of different things that you can figure out with the context. Those questions around what's working and what's not working are really good, but we've found that they take a long time to figure out. Like that's why we gave ourselves kind of 2 years to just arrive at the farm and figure out what's going on, because and those what's not working are where a lot of tension can come in between the new generation and the older generation, because that's again where those new ideas come of, why are they doing things this way, and I learned how to do it this way, and that kind of thing. But giving the space for just figuring out, okay, what, this is what they're doing, let's just do it. My friends of ours that moved on to a new place in kind of transition, they kind of thought of those first couple of years as like, what we're going to do is just do status quo to figure everything out, and then we might do a little bit of plus. So maybe status quo plus in year 2 kind of thing. And I like the way they thought about that. Decision making. So who are the decision makers, and what role and responsibility does everybody have? And a really important question is do they have the skills for that role and responsibility? Do they want to be doing that? Is that somebody's responsibility to do the finances, but they really don't like doing it? Those kinds of questions. Another one is who has veto power and over what? We were previously at my parents' farm in Alberta, and that was one of our challenges, is that we didn't have a clear sense of who had veto power. And lots of times we just wouldn't do something because we assumed that it would be vetoed, which in hindsight, we probably could have done them. But we just didn't have the conversation because we just didn't know. Also thinking through these last 2 questions, like how are decisions made and what do we do when we don't agree, is really important. And in our current situation, we haven't figured out what that looks like, but we still got work to do. This is a process that we're in. And then planning. So this is kind of what people traditionally think of when you think of succession planning or transition planning. This is where you get down to like documenting things, and it is really important to document things. But this is like the nuts and bolts of how it would actually work and how the transition itself would unfold over time. It would include a business plan and a land agreement if that's the case. Yeah, all of those like hardcore, okay, let's look at what this is going to look at like over the next 3, 5, 10 years. Then the last 2, the working, just talking about like how things work, like what's season to season, month to month, what day to day, what does that look like? And what resources do you need in order to be successful day to day, and having some conversations about that point about self-care. If you are at a market garden and you need to do yoga every evening to do that self-care, whatever that looks like for you, let's get that out on the table and communicate it so people can work around it. And one of the examples on our farm is that I really like to sleep in. I don't like to get up very early in the morning. And that's just been part of my lifestyle. And my father-in-law comes from, they used to have a dairy before we came. And so he's used to getting up super early. So we had to kind of get on the same, figure each other out. And he had to learn that he can't call our house before 9 o'clock in the morning. So those kinds of things, like if you can learn about each other and figure those things out, it's important. And then lastly, this piece around learning and self-improvement. So this, the process only, it really works well when learning is at the center of it, and figuring out, like, what do I need to learn? What do other people around me, what could they learn in order to be successful through this transition? Figuring out what you're good at. Maybe it's something around teaching each other. Those are also important conversations to have, of saying, I'm going to the Quivira conference every year because that's where I get my nourishment. How do we work that into what we're doing here? So those are conversations to have. And again, that's all in Toolkit that we'll provide you guys with, or you have been provided with already. Just a couple quick things before we jump into a last discussion, and you guys can share more about your situations and stories. It's important to recognize that we're all learning in this. So the skills that have gotten us here on the farms aren't the skills that are going to be the ones that are needed to move us forward. We might be really successful at farming, or we've built up all this farm production, farm business kind of knowledge, but farm transition takes other skills. And so we need to be working on those skills as well. And I just love this quote, that thinking people all recognize that the roads ahead are arduous, that the best conceived actions will give rise to further problems that require yet more skill, wisdom, and breadth of conception. So just because you move ahead a little bit doesn't mean that it's going to be smooth sailing ahead before you. So it is a bumpy transition, is a bumpy road, and I think there's a lot of really great things that can happen through transition, but it always comes with some kind of challenge and some kind of thing that you need to work on. But I think the exciting thing with farm transition is that if you do it thoughtfully and keep everybody engaged, that you just never know where you're going to get. And I just really wish that we could all, end up in places that are way better than what we imagined could even be possible through farm transition. And I hope that some of the resources and the conversations that you can have will help you to do that. So just some tips for having these conversations, for your own conduct within them. Work to develop an understanding from the people involved of how they came to think the way that they did. I think very often, somebody says something and people just say, that's stupid, or, they're just stupid, or they're dumb because they did that thing. But there's a reason why they did that. And digging into the reasons behind that can really tell you something about what the situation is, how that person makes meaning of the world, what's important to them. And you can really dig in and work with that. If you just kind of go with this reaction of like, that's stupid, you don't get anywhere. So having this, like we said at the beginning, having this inquiring kind of approach to this is really important. Trust is really built by growing this repertoire of conversations over time. So, just because you didn't feel right about one conversation doesn't mean it's the end, or somebody kind of made you mad about a conversation. It's not the end. And my dad and I used to train horses together, and he always said to me, always end on a good note. And so no matter what, he would be so mad at me if I just like got off the horse and stormed into the house and that was it. He said, you got to end on something positive and just try and feel good about what happened at the end of it. And I think that's true for these conversations too, is building, end on something that's just say a stupid joke or whatever needs to be to just make somebody smile and not storm off. And that's really hard to do, but can be really helpful. And a really great example is last winter, my father-in-law and I had a big blow up at one of these table meetings that I tried to host. And I went away crying and he went away yelling. And I think it was 2 days later, he came and he just had some crocuses for me. And he didn't really say anything, but I kind of just recognized that that was his way of trying to repair the relationship and, try and end that on a good note, I guess. But it was really super sweet. So I think that's important. The other thing from training horses is that people, like animals, don't learn well when they are threatened. So watch for signs of violence or silence. So, I mean, it's hard to tell when somebody is threatened, but this is often a reaction that they have. And this is from the book, Crucial Conversations. And violence is like, when people are threatened, the violence is like what my father-in-law did, the aggression, the big boasting, the slamming things around, but he really felt threatened in the situation. And I recognize that what I do is silent. So if I feel threatened, I just shut my mouth. I don't say anything. And neither of those responses are actually helpful for moving the conversation forward, but they're really important signs that somebody is not feeling comfortable. So being able to stop, take a step back, and figure out what's going on and bringing people back in. And then again, just practicing endless patience. Somebody in our group wanted patience from the previous generation as their superpower. It's something that we really need to cultivate in ourselves, that this is a long process, but it's a really important process for us to engage in. And we just need to have that patience and perseverance to keep going with it, because this is really important work to do as future stewards of the land, helping them get onto the land. So that was a lot, but we would like to invite you now to, we'll just do a checkout circle. So we've got about 20, maybe we'll go for about 20 minutes and then come back to the big group. And in that group, we'd like you to answer just a few questions, or think through a few questions. Feel free to share your situation and go beyond these questions if you want to. But just, what's your top takeaway from this presentation? What are some ways that you'll know that your transition process is going right, or that these conversations are going right? And what are some next steps that you have? Maybe there's a person you need to talk to. Maybe there's a conversation you need to have with yourself. Think through some of the next steps that you can do. So we'll do the same process. Alex will throw us into breakout rooms again, and we'll have some facilitators there again to lead the conversations.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to open the rooms now, so you should see that dialog box pop up again. So yeah, enjoy your checkout circle, and we'll meet back here in the main session in about 20 minutes.
Don't use what's not helpful, that kind of thing. We also have, yesterday or this week, we just released the BC Transition Toolkit for Non-Family Farm Transfer. And this is BC, British Columbia based, so it's focused on Canada and their provincial regulations, but there's a lot of other great stuff in it about just different ways of doing transition, different examples of things, and that you can take and apply to your own context. So I encourage you to go check that out. It's just on our main page right now if you go to youngagrarians.org. And then we also have the BC Land Access Guide, which is a document more for like if you're looking for somebody to come onto your land, or if you're looking for somebody engaged in transition with, or if you're a new farmer looking for land. That's a great document. Helps you to think through kind of where to look, how to approach things, different kinds of arrangements and different kinds of land access. And yeah, it's a great document too. Again, it's BC based, so the kind of rural technical stuff might not totally apply to your situation, but it'll give you a place to start with. So yeah, and like from our group, we heard a lot of amazing stories of people who are involved in transition. And I think the big thing is like to encourage you to stay in touch with us. We would love to hear examples of innovative things that you guys are doing. or challenges you're having, because that's how we can design resources and programming to help support different people. And yeah, lastly, just a big thank you for being who you are and doing all the amazing things that you're doing and being part of this amazing community, and being willing to engage in farm transition, and just, you know, being on the forefront of this like amazing opportunity that we have to reconnect with the land, rebuild communities, and create something amazing for our world. So thank you for an awesome workshop. We wish you all the best, and we'll close it off there.